movement is ascendant. They understand this movement's got real power and force in back of it. They are think right now, if we don't do something, and that is decapitate leadership, that's one of the reasons they're coming after O'Keefe and Rudy and myself and everybody, and Charlie Kirk with the stories, and another hit piece on Charlie. They're trying to decapitate the leadership, figuring that the sheep will just go off. President Trump has to be very careful. There are forces out there, dark forces out there, that have made a decision. That decision is that Donald J. Trump, regardless of what votes say, will never return to the White House and control, because they understand once he gets back in, it's game over, right? The taking on the deep state, his knowledge base today, the knowledge base of people around him. That's why my number one projection for 2024 is nobody knows nothing, right? We have no earthly idea how this is going to turn out, except you have a irresistible force meeting, a massive resistance. And so this is going to collide. And remember, there's no negotiating, right? What we demand on the return to the original American Republic is non-negotiable. What they've done is non-negotiable to them. So that's where we are. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose. And for the first time, you can smell the fear.
What do you say to the people who like many of your policies, who like the fact that you're pushing the establishment, but at the same time, aren't you just kind of helping President Biden become a president again and get reelected?
I'm very confident that we're going to win the race. I'm running against the two weakest candidates in American history. President Trump has a very, very intense following, but it's relatively small. And President Biden, there's almost nobody that I've met. In fact, I can say I've never met anybody so far who says you should vote for President Biden because he has a great vision for the country, that he's energetic, that he can grapple with the big problems. They all say you got to vote for him because otherwise Trump is going to start a dictatorship. My polls right now, I'm beating both candidates in all Americans under 45 years old. In Americans under 35 years old, I'm beating them both by 10 points. I'm up to now 24% average in the battleground states, which puts me within 10 points of winning the election. I can win the election theoretically with 34%. And I'm already at 24% in key states like Michigan. And I have almost a full year. And this is with spending very, very little money compared to them. I'm leading with independent voters. I'm at 36 with independent voters, and President Trump is at 27, I think, and President Biden is at 31. We're essentially in a three-way tie with Hispanic voters. I'm leading everybody with mothers who have children at home. The only group that I don't do well in are baby boomers. I believe that the reason that I'm not doing well with them is that they get their news from television, from MSNBC, from CNN, and then from the New York Times and the Washington Post. I have 7 kids, and I would believe that none of them have ever watched evening news on TV. They get their news from other sources. They get it from the internet, they get it from podcasts, etc. And in that generation, I am dominating. So, and what we're seeing anecdotally is that people who watch my interviews, long-form interviews, even liberal Democrats, have a very, very high conversion rate. So my strategy over the next 11 months is to get as many of those people to be able to see interviews with me, to ask me questions, to get to know something about me that's outside this kind of stew of defamations and pejoratives that define me in the mainstream media.
What's going on in the polling numbers?
Well, the big number is Joe Biden's failed. And I take a longer term view of this because I worked for the president for a number of years, for President Trump. And, after he left office, I met with him in Mar-a-Lago. We had some polling numbers. And it was in early February, and it's reported in Woodward's book or whatever, but they got the dates wrong. But 2/3 of the Republican primary voters wanted him to run again back then.
Wow.
And I reminded him of Ronald Reagan. For those of us who volunteered for Reagan in 76, there was buyer's remorse that we didn't get the nomination. And then by the time Jimmy Carter had failed in 1980, Reagan won in a landslide. Well, back then I told President Trump in 21, I said, let's see what happens. Biden's going to fail. And when he fails, people will want you back. I didn't think Biden would fail this gloriously the way he's done. I mean, the country's in real dire straits with inflation, the economy, wars going on in Ukraine and the Middle East, and the borders open. It's unbelievable. So 68% of all voters in our last national poll said the country's on the wrong track. Economy's getting worse. 65% say it's getting worse. 84% have been negatively impacted by inflation. 46% they can't make ends meet. And you know what? President Trump is beating Joe Biden in virtually all the national polls for the popular vote. And Biden has tried to indict his leading political opponent, Donald Trump, to keep us from winning again. So with that kind of a dynamic, Donald Trump has gone from being ahead in the National Republican primary, 42 to 31 in January, to destroying the field with 58% to like 11% to 8% against DeSantis and Nikki Haley, and then winning in Iowa, winning in New Hampshire, winning in South Carolina, which is Nikki Haley's home state.
Right.
I mean, the voters want Donald Trump to be president again. They want things to get better.
Hey everybody, I'm here with my friend Tora Bright and her little baby Halo. And Tora is a gold medal Olympian snowboarder, and we're here to wish you all a happy new year. And we're lucky enough, God has blessed us to be able to stand here in this landscape and in this wilderness and be with our families, be with my children over this holiday. And Tor and I were talking that we both come from big families and that we would pound on each other and fight each other all the time when we were inside. But as soon as our parents told us to go outside, all the fighting would stop. And something comes into you when you're in nature. This is where, God talks to us through many vectors, through each other, through organized religion, through art, music, and literature and poetry, but nowhere with the clarity and texture and grace and joy as through creation. And I hope all of you get to go out at some point to see some local greenery over the next couple of days to renew your spirits and get ready for a wonderful new year. And we wish a happy new year to every one of you.
Happy New Year. Much love.
And what about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
I think he's just kind of like eye candied. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere.
But he doesn't have your support.
Not mine, no. I mean, the anti-vax thing is nice, but that's about all he has going for him.
I heard rumors that Trump might have for the vice president, but that'd be great if he would switch like that. That'd be awesome.
He switched from Democrat to independent. Do you see him make the leap to Trump?
I do.
Really?
I do.
He's one of them rhinos, I think. Behind it all, I mean, he looks one way, but he says something behind your back, and you can't trust him. There's no trust there, so no, I wouldn't even give him a second thought.
What do you think of RFK Jr.?
Has been absolutely correct, 100%. I'm 100% with him on exactly one issue, and that has been the virus.
There has certainly been discussion on the internet about what possible effect the RFK Jr. presidential run could have, but it's weird that so much of it has been focused on how it could affect Joe Biden. And I get initially, he's a Democrat, supposedly, so I get why they're doing that. But I think that there's a lot of really interesting questions to ask about how it could affect Donald Trump. And I love seeing from the point of view of Trump rally goers what they think about him. Now, again, they're Trump supporters, so you're not going to have a bunch of people that are like, yeah, I actually like him better than Trump. I don't expect that. But do they like where he stands on the issues? Do they think that ideologically he has much in line with Donald Trump? I think these are interesting questions. And interestingly, many of them, despite how a lot of them were willing to say that they, as you saw with the last guy, they agree with him on the virus, or many of them like his positions against vaccines, they don't think that he is going to draw support from Donald Trump. So they're saying, we agree with this guy on these issues. And so if they're representative of anything, you would assume that other Trump supporters will agree, but that he is not going to cut into Trump's support. And it is interesting, like they're pretty committed, but I do wonder, because there are these issues that he really does seem to draw more support from Republicans on. So wouldn't we expect that he's going to get some of that support? And the polls have been a little bit mixed. So he's drawing like 22% generically in polls when Trump and Biden are on the ballot against him. Where that support comes from, it really comes down to the individual poll. But there is certainly, in this video, reason to believe that he could draw some Trump support. Now, of course, what they cite most regularly is his position on vaccines. And what I find so interesting about that is when there are criticisms against RFK Jr. as being anti-vax, there's very often a defensive response saying that's not true. He's not anti-vax. He's never been anti-vax. He's never said anything against vaccines. He just wants more regulation, blah, blah, whatever. But when you ask the anti-vaxxers, they seem to think that he's anti-vax. So I would say if that characterization is not true of RFK Jr., then he's going to really want to get out in front of this, because a lot of people who are devoted anti-vaccine activists, skeptics, whatever, they seem to have drawn apparently the wrong view of RFK Jr. on this particular issue. So much so that not only are they wrong on his position, according to RFK Jr. supporters, but that they think that's like his main draw, except for the guy who says that his main draw is that he's eye candy. And I don't think that he means that physically, although you can understand why people might interpret it that way, with RFK Jr. putting out videos of him exercising shirtless outdoors or something, but that he's like a shiny thing to draw attention. And I think that that is actually a pretty good comment coming from this Trump supporter. Is he just a shiny thing that is going to draw some focus? You know, he's going to have some viral statements or whatever. He's going to register on some polls, and he's going to draw some initial attention from Trump supporters and maybe even from some Biden supporters, but not actually make a big impact? I don't know. I think that that Trump supporter could be onto something, though, because at least, you know, in my own experience, I don't see him drawing as many headlines as he was in an earlier phase of this thing. It's possible that when we move into the general election, maybe he'll like pop back up on people's radar, but it is at least interesting at this point to see that Trump supporters are not worried about what impact he could have, even though polling indicates that it could be significant.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.
"2024 looms in the distance as 2023 comes to a close. And with 2024 comes, of course, the presidential election. But Americans might not be able to cast their ballot for their preferred candidates, as we've covered a number of times on Rising. Former President Donald Trump has been removed from Colorado's primary ballot as a litany of lawsuits in other states across the country try to do the same. Third-party candidate RFK Jr. appeared on Charlie Kirk's show last week to discuss the move, calling it one of the craziest decisions he'd ever seen. Let's watch.
That's one of the craziest decisions that I've seen, and it's terrible. I mean, it's just terrible that they, people, half the country wants to vote for Donald Trump, somewhere around half. And, if another country did that, like Pakistan or Iran or...
We would sanction them.
Well, yeah, we'd say that's not really a democracy. But, we're doing it now.
Faced with that reality, the Super PAC supporting Kennedy American Values 2024 has rolled out its ballot access priorities, announcing it will focus on 7 states that add up to 183 electoral college votes: Arizona, California, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, New York, and Texas. The PAC's founder, Tony Lyons, said of RFK Jr.'s chances that, quote, Kennedy has 2 clear pathways to the White House. We will do everything we can while working closely with our attorneys and without coordinating with the campaign to make sure that the Uniparty fails in any efforts to derail the peaceful populist revolution that he represents. Here to talk about the PAC's plan for ballot access in 2024 is PAC founder Tony Lyons. Tony, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Tony, why don't you walk our viewers a little bit through how you chose those initial 7 states to focus on?
Yeah, so we chose, the states that we felt were really critical, where we felt that there were most likely to be challenges, and that those challenges were going to be expensive and time consuming, and that those were the places, those were the real battlegrounds for ballot access. So we're putting a lot of resources into that, and we're fighting for a fair election, and we feel that the American public ought to be outraged that a candidate and a super PAC have to spend millions and millions of dollars to get on the ballot when a candidate is polling at between 20 and 24%.
Yeah, ballot access is a huge issue for third-party and independent candidates, and always glad to give it more coverage. The entrenched nature of the two-party system is so hard to go up against on a structural level. But I wonder what you make of the decision by the Colorado court to refuse to let Donald Trump's name even appear on the ballot. RFK Jr. obviously calling this crazy, a blow to democracy. What are your thoughts?
I have the same thoughts, that I think that people who are warning or, saying that they're trying to protect us from losing democracy in this country are the same people who are trying to take it from us. So, we don't need people to take people off the ballot, to kick people off Twitter, to protect us. We want people to get on the stage with opponents and tell us what their policies are. So we don't want people to be censored and vilified and deplatformed and, like I said, taken off the ballot. We want candidates who will get on the stage and show what their ideas are, what their policies are, what they would do as president for the people of this country. And so there are all of these forces who claim to be trying to protect us, but they're really trying to control us. So they're trying to tell us what to do, what to think, what to put into our bodies, and, who we are allowed to vote for. And that is fundamentally un-American, and it should not stand in this country. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with the person. It doesn't matter if it's, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or Bobby Kennedy. What matters is that we have certain principles in this country that need to be defended.
So you really have your work cut out for you. I was working on the 2020 Bernie Sanders campaign. It was a mess in 2016 as well. You make a good point to say that you have to turn your efforts towards addressing any coordination of the uniparty to derail RFK Jr.'s chances here. So what does that look like? What lessons are you drawing on from how, Democrats and Republicans have both sort of pushed outsiders out of having any real political chance?
Yeah, so I think that the American public is not willing to stand for it, and that you're going to see a rebellion in 2024. That if these kinds of tactics continue, I think that Americans are going to take to the streets. They're not going to accept this kind of an outcome. They want a candidate who proves to them that he's healthy, that he's authentic, that he's going to fight for them, that he has integrity. And when you see Bobby Kennedy getting up on national television to defend the rights of his opponent, that's the kind of character that we need in a president. And I think the American people see that, and they're tired of these games, and they simply will not accept them.
Yeah, I think it's quite a contrast with President Biden, who I believe said that, he'll let the courts decide it, but of course, former President Trump was responsible for an insurrection. Does RFK Jr. hope to eventually debate? Both these individuals have not participated in debates within their own sort of nominating system. Donald Trump is not attending the Republican debates against Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, et cetera. And so far, Joe Biden has given, and his team have given no indication that they would, participate in a debate with. He has challengers as well: Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, et cetera. I think the assumption is, when prime time starts, they're going to go head to head if they are indeed the two nominees, the two major party nominees. How would RFK Jr. distinguish himself in that environment?
So I think that, Bobby Kennedy has the kinds of qualities that you can't train for, you can't hire a consultant for. He has integrity, authenticity. He tells the truth when he talks. And I think people really see that. And you're seeing that when people hear him talk, they're converted by him. So right now, if the election was held today and only people under 45 could vote, Bobby Kennedy would win the election. So you're seeing that when he's allowed to talk. And so, those people, that demographic, that age group, they get their information from podcasts, from shows like this, not from the New York Times or the Washington Post. So when the places that are not censoring him allow him to talk directly to the American public, that public listens to him. So if Bobby Kennedy gets on stage, people will see the qualities that he has, and they will want to vote for him. And that's why both parties, the Uniparty, basically wants to keep him off the stage, because they're afraid that he will convince the American public that he will be a better president. And that's something that ought to happen in a democracy, that you ought to be able to see the candidates, listen to their arguments, and make a decision for yourself.
What do you make of what the 2024 presidential race will be when it comes time for everyone to cast their ballots in the general? Are you anticipating Trump being the nominee from the Republicans, Biden with the Democrats, and then RFK being the very viable third-party candidate? Are you anticipating, potentially challengers from the left, the Green Party being extremely viable as well? I'm curious what you think that looks like and what your strategy is for this type of scenario where we could have 4 very viable candidates where Americans are used to having 2.
Yeah, what I think is going to happen is that it's going to be Trump, Biden, and Bobby Kennedy. And like I said, I think that if he gets on the stage, which he has to, the American people will demand it. And on the stage, he will convince the American public that the other 2 candidates are not candidates who they want to be their president. So I think that's how it's going to play out. I see a pathway to that. And I think that the struggles are going to be ballot access. Like I said, it's an outrage, but we're going to win these battles. The campaign's going to win the battles that they engage in the states that they're working in. And Bobby Kennedy is going to get on the ballot in every state, and he's going to win the election.
Before we let you go, I know there was some news involving you and your publishing company a few days ago, Skyhorse purchasing Regnery, a conservative publisher. Can you give us just a few words on the details of that and why that was a good business venture for you?
Sure. Skyhorse Publishing is trying to set itself up. I am trying to set up Skyhorse Publishing as a free speech publishing company to combat the sort of censorship and vilification that people on all sides get when they don't follow the mainstream narrative. So Regnery is a publishing company that's, been in business for 75 years. It publishes kind of mainstream Republican authors, some really great books over many, many years, more than 1,500 books. So I'm really proud to be able to combat the censorship of those kinds of books in the publishing field and make sure that in the same way that we have choice in politics, that people have choice in books and ideas. And that, I think, is so fundamental to this country. And I'm proud to be a part of those kinds of struggles, both in politics and in publishing.
Tony Lyons, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I am joined now by the former President of the United States, Donald Trump. Mr. President, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Great to have you.
Good morning.
Merry Christmas.
You too. You too. We're going to have a good year, I hope.
Oh, I think we're going to have a great year. I was just talking with Ben Domenech and Sarah Bedford. We don't think President Biden has given more than 3 long interviews. I'm about to ask you maybe 20, 30 questions. We think he's given 3 long interviews this year to Conan O'Brien, Stephanie Ruhle, and Scott Pelley. What do you think that tells us about President Biden?
Well, he's incompetent, and he was 25 years ago, too, if you look at his policies. But he's grossly incompetent. He's not fit for office. And I really think he's a danger to democracy. I really believe that because of his incompetence.
Now, Mr. President, I'm not going to talk to you about the trials on which you are under an order not to speak because...
You mean the Biden trials?
Yeah,
the Biden trials.
I consider those orders to be...
Yeah, but Yeah, people have to understand these are all Biden trials. These were all inspired by and pushed by DOJ. So this is somebody attacking a political opponent like never before. Every single trial is a Biden trial.
And I believe they're unconstitutional. I think those orders are unconstitutional. They're broad. They're overly broad. I think they're vague. They'll be reversed. But we can talk about the Colorado case. I think that is a joke, the biggest joke I've seen from the state court ever. Have you already appealed it?
We're in the process of doing it. Everybody thinks exactly what you're saying. They're trying to take the election away from the voters. And this is the same group. I guess it's Crew. I've beaten them about 20 times. I beat them on emoluments. They sue me on anything. It's a group of radical left lunatics, and they sue anytime they can. And this one is really a crazy one. And if they ever did that, it would be so bad for this country. You have no idea. And you understand it would be a big problem for the country.
Oh, I think it will be a 9-0 reversal. I hope it comes today. But I wanted to make sure you appeal.
I think that's the kind of a reversal. It should not be given any credit, not even the credit of one Supreme Court justice.
I agree. Now let's move to substance. On Israel, you moved the embassy to Jerusalem. You backed the annexation of the Golan Heights. You shepherded the Abraham Accords. Given your experience with Israel, how do you assess Joe Biden's support of Israel? He did go in the immediate aftermath of the massacre, but it's been awfully wobbly in my view since then. What do you think?
So since then, he's gotten weaker and weaker and weaker. But where he's really let him down is what happened during 3 years. When I was president, Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran couldn't do business with the United States. And they were totally broke. They had no money. They had no nothing. And they would have made a deal if the election weren't rigged, which you and I disagree with, which is fine. But they would have made a deal. I would have had a deal with them in 1 week to 2 weeks after the election. They were absolutely broke. I did such a job. No money for Hamas, no money for Hezbollah, no money for anybody. In fact, you once did a story on the fact that there's very little money going out to these terror groups. Under Biden, he took away all the sanctions. Anybody under me, anybody that did any business whatsoever, including especially the buying of oil. And I told President Xi and I told everybody, anybody buys oil, India, France, anybody buys oil, we don't do business with them. They were down to just selling literally drops of oil, and they were bust. They had almost no money. They were in big trouble. And then Biden came in and he made them rich. He took all the sanctions off. Now they have $250 billion. They have more money than most countries, and they are loaded up with cash. On top of, and this is peanuts, everybody talks about the trade that we made for hostages a few weeks ago, where they got $6 billion for that. And then they got another $10 billion because they sold some electricity to Iraq, which we gave them, $10 billion. Think of that, $10 billion. So, but I'm not even talking about that. The big one is they have $250 billion in cash. Biden gave it to them over a 3-year period by taking away my sanctions. And now you can't talk to them because they're rich as hell and they won't talk to.
And they're funding their terrorist proxies. The Iranian proxies have attacked American troops. They've attacked American troops dozens of times in the last 10 weeks since Israel was invaded by Hamas. What would you have done if American troops had been attacked this way?
I would hit them so hard. I don't want to say where. I know exactly where. But I would, it's very tough to say exactly what I'm going to do on your radio show and announce it to the world. It's so crazy when I guess they call that democracy, but it's a very crazy thing. But I would hit them so hard. They know where. They would have never done it with me. And they would have never done it because they were poor. But they now really never would have done. It's very interesting. I saw a Democrat congressman being interviewed 2 weeks ago, on one of the crazy shows, maybe To Face the Nation. And I was watching this thing, and he said, well, one thing I will say, Iran was broke during the Trump administration, and it's exactly the word to use. They were broke. Now their riches can be, and that's all because of Biden. So words don't mean anything. Now, even the words, however, he sounded very good the first day, and then the second day was okay. Now he's not on Israel's side at all.
Well, they're going to not veto the Security Council Resolution 8. Let's talk about the Houthis. They're firing stuff at our ships and cargo ships every day. We haven't done anything. What would you do if the Houthis attacked our ships and cargo ships?
Well, first of all, it would have never happened. Well, I'll tell you what. the attack on Israel would have never happened. We wouldn't be in this position. And in Ukraine wouldn't have happened. And inflation wouldn't have happened. None of it would have happened here. So it's so sad to see. But it's happening now because they don't respect our president. They don't respect our country. You'd hit them so hard like they've never been hit before, and that would end it.
I do believe you're right about Ukraine. I want to know if you would have left the U.S. citizens, the green card holders, the SIV applicants, and billions of dollars in weaponry in Afghanistan like President Biden did.
No, of course not. I had it all set to leave. I was leaving also. We would have left with dignity and strength. Don't forget, he took the military out first. Only a child maybe would do that, although I actually gave a quiz to 2 young 5-year-old kids just out of little curiosity, and they all agreed you leave the military and you take the military out last. A child would have taken the military out last. We took the military out first. So remember, 18 months, and you know this very well, not one American was killed. Not one American was even shot at until we had that horrible day with the airport and the planes lifting off with people falling off the planes and everything else, and soldiers killed. And by the way, leaving Americans behind, and $85 billion worth of the best military equipment in the world that I bought, that he gave to them. He gave them 70,000 trucks, many of them armor-plated, 700,000 rifles and guns, goggles that are brand new, night goggles where you can see perfectly when you fight at night, so now there'll be a nice fighting force. This guy is the worst president we've ever had.
Now, President Trump, you have been accused by all sorts of people in the Beltway of planning on being a tyrant and a dictator. I saw you on with our friend Sean, and you made a joke. I thought it was a joke that you wanted to be a dictator for a day, but a bunch of them said, oh, see, he's serious one day. So I want to put it to you bluntly. If you are reelected, will you peacefully surrender power at the end of your second term as required by the Constitution?
Of course, and I did that this time. And I'll tell you what, the election was rigged, and we have plenty of evidence of it, but I did it anyway. The other question you should ask is you should ask the other side, will you cheat on the elections? Because the only way we're going to lose is if they cheat on the elections.
Oh, I would ask Joe Biden that, but Joe Biden doesn't do interviews. Mr. President, you've also said illegal immigrants are poisoning our blood. What do you mean by that?
When you look at it, and you look at what's coming in, we have from all over the world, not one group. They're coming in from Asia, from Africa, from South America. They're coming from all over the world. They're coming from prisons. They're coming from mental institutions and insane asylums. They're terrorists. Absolutely. That's poisoning our country. That's poisoning the blood of our country. And that's what's happening. And we're not talking about a specific group. We're talking about this is equal opportunity. They're coming from all over the world, and we have no idea who they are, where they are. They have people coming in. We don't even know what the language is that they speak. We have nobody that speaks the language. And they're loading up our classes. We're loading up our classes, our school classes, with children that don't speak the language. They don't speak our language, and nobody knows what's going on. Now we are poisoning our country. We're poisoning the blood of our country. We have people coming in. Think of it. Mental institutions all over the world are being emptied out into the United States. Jails and prisons are being emptied out into the United States.
Now, Mr. President, your critics say that you are using Hitlerian language that was used to dehumanize Jews by saying that Jewish blood cannot be part of German blood. Do you have anything like that in mind when you say poisoning our blood?
No, and I never knew that Hitler said it either, by the way. And I never read Mein Kampf. They said I read Mein Kampf. These are people that are disinformation, horrible people that we're dealing with.
So you intend no racist sentiment whatsoever when you say poisoning our blood? My recommendation would be saying...
If you look at the polls, I'm doing incredibly with African American. I'm doing incredibly with Hispanic. The highest numbers anyone's ever seen for a Republican candidate. The reason is they know me. Look what I've done. Criminal justice reform, colleges. I got the colleges and universities, black colleges and universities funded. Nobody else did that. I've done so much. Opportunity zones with Tim Scott. I got that done. Nobody ever thought that would happen. And by the way, it's one of the most incredible programs that nobody ever talks about now.
So you mean nothing racist by that? Because your critics keep saying, oh, he wants to be Hitler. He's talking about poisoning our blood. He's trying to be a Nazi. How do you respond to these people?
First of all, I know nothing about Hitler. I'm not a student of Hitler. I never read his works. They say that he said something about blood. He didn't say it the way I said it either, by the way. It's a very different kind of a statement. What I'm saying when I talk about people coming into our country is they are destroying our country. This country is, we have prisoners coming in. We have mental patients coming in by the thousands, really by the millions, because you take a look. I believe the number will be 15 million people, maybe more than that, by the time this lunatic leaves office.
If you were reelected,
and he's destroying our country.
If you're reelected, Mr. President, some of your critics said people will refuse to serve. Your former national security advisor, Ambassador O'Brien, was on my show 2 days ago. He gave me a long list of names of people who would come back. People like John Ratcliffe, Rick Grenell, Mike Pompeo, Senator Tom Cotton, Senator Joni Ernst, Senator Dan Sullivan, Congressman Mike Waltz, Congressman Mike Gallagher. O'Brien didn't mention himself, but I'm sure he'd come back. Do you think you'll have any doubt getting talented people on your team?
No, I have so many people. And the good news is, it's very interesting. I told you this once before. So when I got elected, I was not a Washington person. I was there 17 times. I never stayed over, according to the press, but that's probably right. 17 times. I never stayed over. I wasn't a Washington. I didn't know too many people in Washington. And lo and behold, I become president and I go. And I had to rely on other people to give me advice. And I had a lot of great advice. We had a lot of great people. You were the biggest tax cuts and the rebuilding of the military, defeating ISIS, creation of Space Force. We did unbelievable things. Biggest regulation cuts in history. We had a lot of great people, but we had some people I wouldn't have put in. Now I know everybody. I was reliant on other people's recommendation. And sometimes I'd go to a rhino. I wasn't sure if they were a rhino, and I'd get some rhino in office, or I'd get somebody that wasn't good. I could name names very easily, but what's the purpose? But for the most part, I had great people because we had one of the most successful administrations in history. And that's why we're doing so well in the polls. I just see a poll came out. I'm leading by 60 points nationally, leading Iowa by, I think it's like 35 points.
Getting close in New Hampshire. Are you worried about Nikki Haley in New Hampshire?
No, I'm not worried about it. No, I'm not worried about it. I think it was a fake poll. I saw the one poll where I was up by 4 or 5 points. It's a fake poll.
All right, now I want to go to Vice President for a second. I've written in the Post that your short list ought to be Tom Cotton, Mike Gallagher, Joni Ernst, Mike Pompeo, Dan Sullivan, or Robert O'Brien. The latter, of course, would bring you Latter-day Saint votes in Arizona and Nevada. Are you going to name your vice president before the convention? Are you going to give us a list of people you're going to consider? And what do you make of my list?
I think I'd make up a list. Some of those names are great. I agree. And maybe not every single one of them. You understand. But no, I think some of the names you have there are great. And we'll have somebody that's really going to be very, very popular and very, very good. I know a lot of great people. We have a lot of great Republicans.
Will you debate Joe Biden if he is the nominee and you are the nominee?
Oh, well, I look forward to that. How about 10 debates? How about 10?
Well, will you let the Presidential Debate Commission organize them, or will it be your campaign manager, Susie, with their campaign manager? Because that Presidential Debate Commission is corrupt.
They're corrupt, and remember when they turned off my microphone?
Yes.
Remember that? They kept turning off my mic.
I also remember they canceled the debate without talking to anybody.
That's right. No, they're totally corrupt. They're totally Democrat-leaning. That's being nice when I use the word leaning. They are totally corrupt, and they're terrible. With that being said, I would do 20 debates even if it was organized by them, or do as many debates as they want. I'd do a debate every night with this guy. But will you do a debate
with any of the Republican people challenging you? If after New Hampshire there's only one Republican left, will you debate that Republican?
Yeah, I would. If it was very close, I would debate that Republican. Yeah, but
you want me as your moderator?
I'm leading. You would be a good moderator. You always are.
All right, thank you. I want to talk about fentanyl because I asked the candidates about fentanyl. How do we stop fentanyl getting into the country, Mr. President?
Well, I had it done pretty much, and then we had the election result. I'll tell you what happened. I met with President Xi. He was going to criminalize the making of fentanyl. Most of it comes out of China, as you know, and then it gets passed through the border. And I had it down to the lowest level it was since its inception, which, is a sort of a more modern drug, as horrible as it is. It's just horrible what they're doing. They're killing hundreds of thousands of our people. And I had President Xi was going to criminalize it at the highest level, meaning the death penalty. If you make fentanyl, send it over to the United States through Mexico or anywhere else. He was all set to do that. And then we had the election result, so he didn't do it. And I don't blame him for that. But he was all set to criminalize it, and there were going to be harsh penalties if he didn't. This was not a nice conversation. And he was all set. We have to stop fentanyl. We have to stop it at the border. And we have to put tremendous pressure on China. And we have tremendous power over China. Biden doesn't know how to use it. I really believe because he's taken so much money personally out of China that I really believe he's afraid to talk about it. Because any money that Jamie, who's done a great job, and Jim Jordan, who's done a great job, any money that they found is peanuts compared to the real fact. And I believe that we have a Manchurian candidate in Biden. He owes them so much. He has been paid so much money for China that you don't even know about, that nobody's written about. I really believe that he's totally compromised on China. That's why he doesn't do anything.
Do you believe Hunter Biden when Hunter Biden said his father knows nothing about his business? They've changed their story now that it's incontrovertible that his father met with his business partners, but he says his father knew nothing about his business. Do you believe Hunter?
Only a fool would believe that, because you see the pictures now. You see pictures, you see phone conversations. Now they've changed their story. Now he said, well, I didn't partake. Well, he partook. I mean, how many houses does he own? He's never been paid any money more than what a congressman or a senator would make. How many houses does this guy own? He owns houses all over the place. That family is corrupt, and Joe Biden's a corrupt president, and he's an incompetent president. Can we
talk about crime in the cities, Mr. President? D.C. has got a very big crime wave. We've got carjacking. We've had a new murder rate set. How will you help cities control crime in the streets?
I'm going to redo the cities. We're going to rebuild cities. We're going to have tremendous power in cities. I'm going to give immunity, something nobody's ever even talked about. Probably you haven't even heard about it until I've been bringing it up over the last couple of months. I'm going to give immunity. We're going to give a guarantee to police officers, a guarantee, because, you know, an officer stops crime and they throw him out of the police department. He loses his pension. He loses his home. He loses his family or hers family. It's a disaster. They're afraid to do anything, and they're phenomenal. They can stop crime immediately. So we're going to give a guarantee that we are going to take care of their problems. Now, there'll be some bad ones, and it's going to be a very small percentage, and I understand that. That's what happens. You know, they'll bring up one bad accident or incident out of 200. But we are going to give it's a form of immunity. It's a guarantee that we are going to back that police person, and maybe the precinct. We might bring it to a precinct level. We might even bring it to a state level, because some of the states are having a big problem. Because today everybody gets sued for anything. I know that better than anyone. Remember, they're all Biden suits. These are not suits. These are not indictments. These are Biden indictments. But we are going to indemnify all police officers. They're not going to be sued anymore, and they're not going to lose their families and their pensions and everything else that goes with it. And we're going to tell them to do their job. When they see 300 people walking out of a department store, destroying the company, destroying the store, destroying lives, and by the way, killing people in some cases when they're in the store, and then walking out with television sets, those people are going to be hit very, very hard as they're walking out of those doors. Very, very hard.
Now, you know, Mr. President, I think you ought to have a veteran as your vice presidential nominee. That's why my list are all veterans. But Elise Stefanik did a great job 2 weeks ago with the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn. You're a Penn graduate. Right. Were you embarrassed by the Penn president?
Yes, I was. I was embarrassed by all of them. I was embarrassed equally by all. It sounds like they had the same law firm and they had the same kind of an answer, which didn't make any sense. I mean, how simple an answer is that? You say yes. If they're going to say bad things, do bad things with respect to Israel, we will take it very seriously, and we will come down on that, that person very hard. Why aren't they able to say that? They're just not able to say it. I think they are. I think they've disgraced the university, and this woman from Harvard, she should be gone.
That's my alma mater, and I'm embarrassed, and I agree. Let's move to K through 12. Will you condition federal funding to the states on their providing school choice, like is in Iowa and Arizona and Florida and West Virginia? And, there are like 8 states that have school choice. And if we condition federal funding on that, having school choice, we can revolutionize and save American K through 12 education, Mr. President.
One of the many things, frankly, but one of the many things that people like is when I say school choice. And people want it. People want it. It's fair. And you know who wants it more than anyone else? The African American population, more than anybody else. They want school choice. Yeah, I would strongly consider that. We're thinking
All right.
about
Do
that
you
very
expect
strongly.
the vast majority of the Republican Party to rally around you if you are the nominee, even though there are 4 people running against you now?
I think so. I mean, it seems like that's what's happening. Poll just came out. I'm leading by 61 points nationally. I'm leading Iowa by 35 or 40 points. I'm leading New Hampshire by a lot other than this one fake poll that came. It's a total fake. Nobody ever heard of it. It was put out probably by a guy who's now turned out to be a very unpopular governor, Sununu. But no, it's a fake poll. But I'm leading by 50, 60 points nationally. We're doing phenomenal in Nevada. We're doing phenomenal in, you take a look at South Carolina, her home state. They don't like her. And we're doing very well there. We're doing great in New Hampshire, by the way. And we're doing great in Iowa being first. So we'll see what happens, but we're leading by a lot.
Couple more questions, Mr. President. Chief of Staff, you had 4 of them. Chief of Staff is so important. Do you have anyone in mind that you will tell us? They got to be an SOB. They got to be nice to the public, but they also got to be able to deal with you, and you're a very demanding boss. Have you got anyone in mind to be your Chief of Staff?
Well, I had a couple that I thought really did a good job, but we were under a lot of pressure. Don't forget, we had that phony, I would say, to mention a name, Comey, and we had others. They were doing bad things.
Brennan and Clapper, they screwed you before you started. I know they did. They set you up.
I got screwed. That's right. Thank you for using the word. I got screwed before I started. The day I was being sworn in, they were doing stories about impeachment in the Washington Post. We hadn't even started yet. So we had a tougher route than others, and we beat them, and we ran, and we did a great job for 4 years, and we then had a great election, a much better election the second time than the first time, and we're going to have a better election still because, I have never seen spirit, and I think you could attest to this. I've never seen spirit like I have on this one. This is stronger than 1 and stronger than 2. I've never seen anything like it. I'm in Florida, and you go from point to point, and all you see is Trump signs all over the houses all over Florida. And on a 1-to-1 in Florida, I'm beating DeSantis 85-9, and that's in Florida.
Now, Mr. President, I had a discussion with Kristen Welker about how to interview you because Kristen's interviewed you and I've interviewed you. There are 2 ways. One way is to ask you a question, let you answer, and then go on. Another way is to interrupt you and try and fact check you. I think the latter always interrupts the flow of an interview. If there's something wrong, people can correct it later. Which do you prefer?
I prefer where they let me go because, I think it's a much better interview. I speak in rather complex and long sentences, and
I know that.
Really, but it's a good. Isn't it nice to have somebody that can do that? It's really actually would be refreshing. This guy can't. I mean, I watched him the other day asking the people. He couldn't pronounce their name, like NBC, John of NBC. They ask him a question. He reads the answer. He's reading the answer. He's asking a question. Hey, look, I never did that. I'd love to do it. I mean, I'd love to have that
you spend more time on a press line than he does in a press conference. Mr. President, if people vote for Joe Biden, are they really voting for Kamala Harris?
I think so. I mean, let's see what happens. I'm not sure that he gets to the starting gate, to be honest. I don't know how he gets to the starting gate, but certainly I think so. It seems like he's locked into her for a lot of reasons. He has to choose her, I understand. It would seem like the Democrats, if he doesn't run, have to run her. That's what all of the professionals like you are saying. I'm not sure that that's correct, but that's what they're saying. You're locked into her, and she might be, I can't say worse. I think she'd be better than him, actually.
All right, I want to close by talking about
I don't think
Xi
you can have worse
Jinping.
than him.
I want to close by talking about China. They're building ships 1 a month. We're building like 1 a year. We don't have shipyard capacity. We're going to get our rear ends kicked if we get into a confrontation with them. Will you focus on shipbuilding? And if so, what kind and where will you build it, Mr. President? Because we haven't got any capacity.
That's right. We used to build a ship a day. Do you know that during the Second World War?
Yes.
We'd build freighters, tankers. We'd build them a ship a day. And today we're not capable of doing that. We're going to do that. We're going to not only do that, we're going to do airplanes. You don't mention airplanes. With the airplanes, they're building planes at levels that nobody's ever seen before, and we don't build them very quickly. And then they also take, my favorite plane is the F-22 fighter jet, right? The F-22, most beautiful plane I've ever seen, just beautiful, and a really great plane. Well, China copied our design. Exactly. You can't tell any difference between whatever they call their plane and the F-22 fighter jet. None. And, we put that out with Boeing, and we put it out with another company that worked with Boeing, which, we don't have the competition that we used to have because they've all gobbled up all the competition, and we're going to change that. But the F-22 is copied by China. We don't do anything about that. This plane is exact. You cannot, and I'm really good at this stuff, visual. I'm very good at visual. And you cannot tell the difference, and it's a disgrace. We're going to build planes, and we're going to build ships, and we're going to build them big and fast.
You're going to need a Secretary of Defense. You had 4 of them. Now, I've named a bunch of people. Cotton would be good. Pompeo would be good. O'Brien would be good. Mike Waltz would be good. Gallagher. Have you got who? Will you put out a list of people that you will put into the cabinet?
Yeah, that's a good list to start off with. That's what you just said is a good list to start off with. We have it's such an important position. We had Miller at the end who did a very good job.
Yeah, so O'Brien mentioned him. Yep.
I thought he was very good.
Last question. Will you stick with the Federalist Society making recommendations and take your choices from the list? Because, boy, are we getting some very liberal judges like the ones in Colorado that came up with this crazy decision.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. That's we have some judges that would just, you don't have a chance in front of them. Not appointed by me, by the way. I'm very proud of our judges. We did a good job with judges. And we took because what do we know about that? We took from various groups, very strong statements, various very conservative groups, actually. And I think we put some great judges on. I put almost 300 judges on the court and 3 Supreme Court justices. So that was a record. And,
well, I hope the three Supremes join with the other 6 and toss this out. I want to close again with the poisoning our blood comment. It's the most controversial thing you've said is the illegal immigrants are poisoning our blood. Will you explain again? What do you mean by that?
Exactly what I said. People are pouring into our country totally unchecked. Zero. We have no idea where they come from, who they are. They're pouring in because of Biden. He has an open door policy, which is insane. They're coming from many different continents. They're just not coming from the 4 countries that we talk about. They're not coming from, purely Mexico and Guatemala and Honduras, El Salvador, which is more typical. They're coming from all over the world. They're coming from Asia. They're coming from Africa. They're coming from all over the world. They're coming out of prisons. They're coming out of jails. They're coming out of mental institutions and insane asylums. These people are very sick. There are many criminals and there are many terrorists. They did a recent story. They were showing that in 2019, during Trump, they found no terrorists for almost the whole year. They never, in other words, in recapturing or capturing, they had 0 terrorists coming in through Trump because they knew the penalty. I had the ban. I had the travel ban. I had a lot of things. They knew the penalty would be great. Under Biden, every day it's a record. They actually had none. I couldn't believe it myself, to be honest with you. They had 0.
In 2022, Joe Biden had more than 165 people on the terrorist watch list. In the last year of your presidency, right. I believe it was 0. I had those numbers for the NBC debate, so you're absolutely right.
And that's because of my, let's say that's because of my way. They knew that they couldn't do it, and they didn't. But I was even surprised. I was very impressed by that number. It said 0. I had it checked, and they actually had 0. And he's setting records every single week. He's setting records of terrorists pouring into our country. So the answer is they are poisoning our country. They're poisoning the blood of our country. And I'm not talking about a specific group. And I never read Mein Kampf, and I have no idea what Hitler said other than I've seen on the news. And that's a very entirely different thing than what I'm saying. They're destroying our country. They're coming in from every continent, and we have no idea. We have no idea who they are, what they represent. Are they from jails? Are they from prisons? And I will tell you, a big percentage of the people coming in are from prisons and from mental institutions and are terrorists.
Okay, no joking around now, Mr. President. Do you yes. No jokes at all. Do you intend to rule as an authoritarian or a dictator?
Not at all. No, I'm going to rule as somebody that's very popular with the people. And the reason I have a 50-point or 60-point lead, I saw one today, I have a 60-point lead. But the reason is because I had 4 great years. We had 4 great years. We had the greatest economy in history. I rebuilt, think of it, I rebuilt the military. I defeated ISIS. They told me ISIS couldn't be defeated or it would take 4 or 5 years. I did it in a matter of months. I knocked out 100%. You and I had a conversation. I said we were at 99%. We're going to bring them home. You said, why didn't you do 100%? And I thought about it. I said, you're probably right. Let them do it. I said, let other countries do it because they were fighting ISIS too. But I said, let's go do it. And we knocked it out 100%. I think you'll confirm that.
I will, and I would. But I'd like to know: would you stand with Israel until they kill 100% of Hamas?
Yes, you have to get rid of Hamas. They have to do it. They have no choice. People have already forgotten about October 7th. You know, it's like incredible.
I haven't.
Nobody
I'm
knows
glad you
about
haven't either. It's the worst thing I've ever seen, and I saw 9/11, but this was. They were depraved. There were thousands of depraved
heads
people.
Of 42 infants. We're not even talking. We're not talking just young children, which is horrible. 42 infants, beautiful little babies. 42 babies. The heads were chopped off. Okay, this is not acceptable, and you have to get rid of this group of people.
Okay, I'm going to land the plane right here, Mr. President. If we're down to one candidate after New Hampshire, not counting Vivek, because Vivek's never going anywhere. So if it's just you and Nikki, or you and Ron, or you and Christie, you'll come back here and what? Spend 2 hours with me and those two?
I'll spend time with you. You fair? Sometimes you're fair. Most of you
come
fair.
on. I'm always
Today,
fair.
I think you're fair.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, every time I get off, I say, that was a nice interview, and the next day it ends up being a front-page story. But, you know, I'll say what I say. Look, I'm very proud of the job we did. I did a great job as president, and that's why I'm leading so much in the polls. People loved it. We had the greatest economy, so many good things. I mean, had COVID not come, this would have been, nobody would have ever seen anything like it. But we did a great job with COVID, didn't get the credit for it. We did a great job. You know, we did it the Federalist way. We let the governors handle it, but we helped the governors. We did a great job with COVID, but had COVID not come, but even with that, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country.
Do you think
Probably
that
the
Tony
greatest
Fauci
economy.
misled you? He lied to me on this program. He absolutely just lied to me, and Dr. Collins misled me. Did they do that to you too?
I think that they were looking very, very strongly at it. I think they didn't tell us about their relationships long prior to me with China.
Yep.
They had a lot of relationships with China that they didn't talk about, and they should have talked about. I think they misled a lot of people, yeah.
Mr. President, I've taken you too long. I appreciate the time. Merry Christmas to you. I hope you keep coming back, and I'll see you for that debate after New Hampshire if we're down to one, not counting Vivek, because Vivek's never going to quit, right? What do you make of Vivek, by the way?
He's actually, I like him. He thinks Trump was one of the greatest presidents ever, and I said, I got to like that guy. So
Yeah, but he's
I'm
going to be in
rooting for
single
him.
digits
I like
after
him.
New Hampshire. It's just got to
Yeah.
be you and Nikki or you and Ron. Whoever is number two, let's just get a one-on-one going and have a long conversation. I appreciate it, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Very good. Thanks
Merry
a lot.
Christmas.
You. Take care of yourself. Thanks. You too.
Has that decision by the Colorado State Supreme Court only heightened the urgency, in your opinion, for the rest of the Republican field to drop out and get behind the 45th president?
For sure. I mean, the primary was over, and thank you for having me on, Daniel. I really appreciate it. But the primary was already over before 3 or 4 months ago, and probably from the moment that President Trump announced the primary was over. And we've seen the campaigns of Ron DeSanctimonious, we've seen the campaigns of Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, and Vivek, and none of them have a path. And now that the Colorado Supreme Court is literally trying to rob the Colorado citizens for voting for the most popular candidate for president right now, the likely 47th president of the United States in Donald Trump, there's no better sign to me now that the GOP needs to unite behind the president than a literal Supreme Court and judicial overreach trying to happen in Colorado. And, you know, as I wrote in my article, you know, the campaigns of Haley, DeSantis, and Chris Christie and Vivek, none of them have a path forward. Trumpism forms the entire ideology for the GOP, for voters, for the America First movement. And it's never been more clear to me than it is right now that the GOP has got to unite and ensure that Donald Trump is the next president.